encourage the participation, and this is a really important one, recognize contributions online and offline. So again, I'm going back to Verizon because I literally just talked. I think this is something you guys said you were doing, right? Don't just, look, the systems can be engineered online to send rewards. Again, StackOverflow does that. But the other thing we encourage our clients to do when we're working with them is like, hey, if you're on a team and you had a really hard problem solved by you, go thank that person's manager, right? Give them that recognition in the real world. Don't feel like it can only be constrained online, because again, the whole social bond that gets everyone into your community at work in the first place is all about the fact that there's this existing bond we have, so reinforce those. Call it out, celebrate things. And again, this applies to anything that you're doing. But the things you really don't want to do, never offer direct payment for participation. No matter what you're doing, if you're trying to get community motivation, introducing basically almost all participation in communities is driven by what's called our intrinsic motivation, right? Our innate desire to do good, to help, to leverage those social bonds. The absolute best way to destroy an intrinsic motivation is to introduce extrinsic motivators, right? Money, payment, rewards, kind of explicit rewards, that kind of thing. If I understand what I put into a system and what it will return out for me, I'm only going to do those things that return out. And the worst part is, I will actually stop doing the things I was doing for free. So this, by the way, is a good reason why, despite the fact that many people have asked us over the years, you will never be able to pay for an answer to a question on StackOverflow.com. Now, that's not to say you can never do tangible goods. One of the things we do is we send all our clients a whole buttload of swag to raffle off and things. But you've got to disconnect it, right? So it's the, hey, everyone who takes a good action in this month period will be entered into a raffle to win a thing, right? Or one of the other things we do, have a lot of our clients do, is they'll actually take participation in a Stack Overflow community internally and use that as an input to a distinguished engineer program, right? All of these things are about saying hey, let's find the cumulative magnitude of contribution and maybe give a reward based on that. That kind of thing can work great. Paying for explicit actions will always mess things up. And then finally, people do love free swag, seriously. You can make swag out of anything. It is amazing what people will do for a sticker, even if it's a brand they've never heard of. I think it goes back to preschool, is really what it is. Or socks. I spent years campaigning for Stack Overflow to make these socks, and I wear them at any time I'm out of the office. I'm wearing these socks. It's amazing. I don't know why they're so motivating for me. The final thing you need to do is the easiest, right? So you've got to do all this research, set up, think about what you're doing. The most important thing you need to do is get buy-in. This goes back to that idea, right? I said, no healthy community has ever existed by accident. No one ever just set up a forum and it magically took off, right? 4chan had a lot of work put into it to make it what it turned into. But the important part is it was okay for a while. So one of the funny parts about building actually even digital communities is that the first thing you need to do is actually to go talk one-on-one with people, right? You build a giant, massive, highly scalable community one-on-one at first, because you need to get the influential people involved directly. And you do that by going to the folks inside your organization who have a point that you can solve, right? So again, for Stack Overflow, our goal is to help people stop asking the same question over and over again, right? Document it once, get an answer to it. So what do? We go to all the teams who we know are answering the same question over and over again every day, and we say, but wait, there's a better way. And it turns out that it's very easy to convince those people to stop taking questions in chat software and stuff and to drive people to other places, right? And so going and building that support and those influential ones, now I don't have to go convince the other 99% of the people, right? I got the 1% that are crucial. I've changed their workflows. I've got them bought into the idea, and they evangelize it out for me. So to build your base, invite early supporters. So this is another big thing. Nobody wants to be the first person to a party, right? If you walked into the conference, Actually, this is a good, I've never asked this question before, so I'm gonna try. How many people here, coming back from lunch, poked their head into the room at some point before lunch ended, saw it was still empty, and then turned around and like waited until more people came in? Okay, thank God at least a few people did that. Okay, good. Yeah, that's exactly right. We don't want to be the first one there, right? So what happens if you show up to a website and there's no content there, right? You open up a new source code repository and there is no content there. What are you gonna do? You're gonna take one look, you're gonna walk away and go. So you need to find, once you've found those early supporters, people who are enthusiastic about the idea, you need to get them in what's basically a closed beta, right? Get them to seed in initial content to do two things. One, make it look like an active love place. And number two, going back to that early idea, give examples for people of how they should be behaving. One of the other examples I love of this is like everyone here is probably has an office or a canteen, snack room, break room, whatever at work. If you walk into that break room and everyone has left their dirty coffee cups everywhere, what are you gonna do with your dirty coffee cup? Are you really gonna take the time to wash it and put it back? No. But if everyone always does it and there's a couple signs reminding you, you're probably not gonna be that rude person who doesn't clean it. Those early standards are really so important, and your early supporters are the ones who are gonna help you do that. And then from there, you've got your early content, bring everyone into your community and start growing it out. Again, make sure your communications, whenever you're talking to people, you're running marketing campaigns, you're announcing things out, you're doing your newsletters. What is the purpose of what we're doing, right? Keep people focused on that end state vision and then give them a simple ask of what they can do now, right? Here's the vision, here's the one thing you can do to advance it now. Honestly, if you look at even if you go to Facebook, the people with the most advanced user flows and sign up paths, at the end of the day, if you really break it down, they're just doing a complex version of saying, here's this grand vision of what we're building together, and here's a checklist of one easy, super specific thing that you can do right this minute to contribute to that. And then we give you a little bit more of one, and a little bit more of one, and a little bit more of one. And all of a sudden, you have found that you've loaded 7,000 pictures of your children onto Facebook, and you have never talked to another human except through Facebook. And then the final thing, create emotional attachments to early experiences. This is how you get evangelists to do your job for you. And this sounds weird to say in the context of work, but think about the hardest problem you've run into at work, right? Or think about a software tool that you've bought before that, for me, it's Zapier, by the way. Anybody here use Zapier? This is the most incredible friggin' product because the amount of things it has let me do is just stuff I never imagined I'd be able to do. Actually, I'll also give a shout out to GitHub because I'm not a developer myself, but I built a whole CI/CD workflow for managing themes against a Shopify store using entirely the GitHub API and the existing ecosystem. Do you know how ridiculous it feels to be able to do that as someone who can barely hack together Python, right? That kind of magical experience of solving a problem, of being able to do something, that has made it that I go to people, I still tell people about this weird CI/CD workflow that I built myself 3.5 years ago for a Shopify store. So whatever you have to do, again, just especially for those early people to create those early emotional experiences, invest your time there to get those evangelists who are going to do it for you later. So what does this all look like? I'm going to give a quick example from an internal community we built that kind of gives a sense of how we see these happen. We had some people we were working with, 2,000 person tech team, highly technical product. They built something basically for developers with way too much time being spent on support. And only the squeaky wheels were getting fixed, right? Because their product team was doing support, so the only people who got their stuff fixed are the people who complained a lot. Does this sound like a healthy product development process? No, not so much. So what we did is we went in with them, we deployed out a community, and the biggest thing is the product team got 20% of their time back right away, right? Because now instead of the product team having to answer questions, the community answered all the questions, right? And more importantly, the questions were documented in one place and things, so people kept coming back and just finding the same solutions over and over again. New stuff got resolved much faster, because again, who here has emailed into a help desk and had to wait on a 48-hour SLA for some support person to look something up in a knowledge base and email it back to them, Again, not efficient, not a great way to stay innovative and competitive in the marketplace. And then the last thing is, hold on, what communities give you that almost nothing else can is an incredible data-driven layer to work against. So all those, I put up all those logos of like Apple and Microsoft, Google, all those guys. One of the things they have in common is they have dozens of full-time employees who sit on StackOverflow.com every day. Why? Because they've got this massive external community who is using their products, and they can get an incredible data layer about who knows stuff about it, right? Where are the problems in their products that they need to be producing more training and documentation or fixing bugs in their next releases on? And again, you get the exact same thing internally, right? No more just like, hey, who is the person that's complaining the most about it? When you want to go and build a new version of your software, if you've got a community-powered product, you can go back and say, these are the areas in which people are actually asking and looking at questions, right? We have a data-driven approach to where we need to focus more of our resources. So that is how you build internal communities. Assuming there's any time left, I'd be happy to take questions, or I'll be around the conference the rest of the day. So thank you all very much. Yeah, that is probably a very good idea. I'll go ahead and disconnect mine.
Is there an extra handheld mic up there?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, there's two. Yeah.
Does anybody have a question for StackOverflow?
You probably need to turn the mic on.
Hey, Alex.
Hi. We've never
Well
met
done.
before, right?
Yeah, well done with the technical difficulties too. So when you talk about the outcomes towards the end, you talk about a data-driven feedback layer. Can you give some examples of what you've seen companies do with that?
Yeah. So the two biggest things that I've seen companies use their data-driven layers, the first one, like I said, is product level and technology level feedback, right? It's one thing that, I don't know, again, it doesn't matter who I'm talking to, whether it's internal product, external product, every company I've ever talked to has told me like we want to know what we need to fix, where we need to be iterating on, like without having to pull people into focus groups, right? And so that's the first really big thing, just what are people looking at, what are they upvoting all the time, what are they coming back to and looking at over and over again? For instance, the number one upvoted question on Stack Overflow, does anyone know what, or the number one viewed question on Stack Overflow is? Yes, it is how to exit Vim. So, how they have not made an easier way to exit Vim, I don't know. But this is also my favorite example of actually how things like this aren't just used by like bad programmers, right? It's used by people who don't want to have to remember that information, so they just look it up every time they're going to do it. So that's the number one way. Where do we need to be making improvement? Especially internally, the second layer you really get is the who knows the most stuff here, right? I'm guessing a lot of, especially for anyone who's here from a larger company, you've probably got a distinguished engineer program at your company or something like that. Most of the teams I've talked to, when I ask them how they pick people for it, the answer is, well, we let them apply and basically brag about how good they are at their job. And the cool things they do, and it's like, okay, so that's not like a super data-driven way to do it. So one of the things that almost all of our clients have done is they take all the Stack Overflow enterprise data from inside their company, they pump it into their BI and HR tools, and actually cross-reference it. And so when they go to start a new project or when they're going to look for the next generation of distinguished engineers, they're going and saying, who are the people who've been contributing the most knowledge back to the rest of the organization?
Awesome. Yeah, those are good.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Sadro from Exelon. So we've been using Yammer as a way for us to collaborate. And the question that I have is, when we're trying to add users to a specific group, would you encourage us to go ahead and add that user or should we ask them to self-invite and let them join on their own?
I think it really depends on the scale and in part and what the expectation is. If it's sort of more of an interest group, and it also depends on how good the discoverability in the product is, right? So a good example of this is like, a lot of group chat software, let's say. If you're in a large company, you've probably got 1,000+ channels. It's really hard to rely on discovery there, and so forcibly adding people into those kind of small channels and things is probably the way you have to go. If it's larger, and especially if it's like non-essential to their job, but they might just be interested in it, then that's, I think, where you want to more rely on the self-discovery and opt-in so that you don't overload people with too much. Does that answer the question? Yeah. And I think I saw one more that was over in this area.
Somebody got their hand up?
That's it.
No?
Okay.
You got a question?
Cedric?
No, I'm saying you've got a question.
I have a question. Yeah, I usually have a question. Okay, so you are familiar with that we're trying to get certain vendors interested in adding certain functionality to support
Mhm.
InnerSource. One of the main things that we're trying to get people to write is a way for all of the advice that is given from a trusted committer to someone who submitted a patch. It should be distilled down into a persistent, searchable archive, the way that Apache ran for 20 years before the new kids showed up and wanted a Slack channel and a Google Groups and a this and a that. That hegemony of ways to talk to each other is fine as long as you can aggregate the knowledge that's being transferred there. And so you guys are pretty well positioned to be those people. But we need some extra stuff. What we need is a way for all the different ways that companies talk now to be included in the stuff that can be sucked into StackOverflow.
Yes.
Right?
That
So-
is something I've been desperately wanting to build for the last year or two.
Yeah, figuring out an extensible modular architecture
Yeah.
for that would be huge.
Yeah,
And-
so one thing that's actually really interesting about this is that I talked about a couple of the differences between like public communities and private communities on StackOverflow. We found like the rates of engagement. The part I didn't hit on is how much broader the discussion topics are internally, right? So again, anyone who's used StackOverflow knows it's very much like, this is a code, like I am having a line with this code, here's the code to fix it, right? Highly, highly technical, because with the scale we're dealing at there, it's kind of necessary. Internally, it's much more about like, hey, how do I solve problems, right? There's a lot more architecture and best practices and all these kind of things. And the thing that's in part driven us to do is like, developers based on our conversations want this for general open source software. They want it for Microsoft Azure too, right? Or AWS. We just need to figure out how you build it into the site and put it alongside it. But yeah, that's something that we are actively thinking about and trying to figure out.
Yeah, I totally have ideas about that.
I would love to talk to you about it then.
because I've spent a lot of time thinking about this feature. And it's needed. And I don't think it's just needed for InnerSource. I think it's actually needed for open source.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's needed for any technology or platform used by developers.
But I feel like the new kids, the new developers, are gonna realize 5 years from now that they have left out the collection of that knowledge, but it's gonna be too late.
Yeah.
So. And on that cheery note, anybody else have something that they wanna ask him? Can we have a free StackOverflow instance for InnerSource comments?
Maybe. Email me. Sure.
Seems like we should try it.
I mean, it
first,
seems like
doesn't
something
it?
we could do pretty interesting.
Yeah, it seems
Yeah.
like we should try it first. Why not, right?
Yeah. I think we should totally.
Cool.
Cool.
Russ, you got anything you want to ask?
No, I like the idea of the Stack Overflow for the comments. I'm writing it down.
Well, especially if they're going to match our tooling, because then they're halfway there.
Yeah, we ask questions in Slack all the time.
We ask questions in Slack a lot, and they just told me they've already got a pretty tight connection with
Yeah,
Slack.
we have a very good connection into Slack. Turns out a lot of developers use both Stack Overflow and Slack. Who would have guessed?
But is there a
Slack
way?
Overflow.
But is there a way to meta tag the stuff that's hitting through Slack, hitting Stack Overflow, so that it's discoverable again later? That's the real question.
Yeah, I mean, we'll sit down. Unless you want me to literally live demo how it works right now, but
Cool.
That may not be the best use of time for the entire audience.
Yeah, no, but that's good, that's good. All right, I think we can maybe let you get off the stage.
All right, thanks very much,
Is it
everyone.
already?